Major development in the fight over the Panama Canal. Senator Ted Cruz has alleged that evidence suggests Panama may be breaching the 1977 Canal Treaty. This is the headline. Evidence shows Panama may be in violation of that treaty. The accusation has raised concerns over international agreements and the sovereignty of transit rights. The implications could be significant, potentially affecting maritime trade and relations between the United States and Panama. So there is so much in this. Let's first have a listen to Ted Cruz.
But the Panama Canal was not just given away. President Carter struck a bargain. He made a treaty. And President Trump is making a serious and substantive argument that that treaty is being violated right now. This committee has jurisdiction under the Senate rules over the Panama Canal, and today we will examine evidence of potential violations. President Trump has highlighted two key issues. Number one, the danger of China exploiting or blocking passage through the canal. And number two, the exorbitant costs for transit.
All right, so the cost seems to be the thing that they're all very much concerned about in the first place. Donald Trump speaking about this as well. But there are also competitors at the moment looking at trying to take this on. Why the focus on the Panama Canal?
So currently, I listened to this hearing, and it was quite long. Plus, there was a lot of other news happening today. So what they are being told and what they have shared at this meeting, in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, was that Chinese companies are right now building a bridge across, and they are slow rolling it so that this continues for decades. And right now, according to this information, is that China controls who can come in and out and when. And so this is something, again, when you look at President Trump, and he is, constantly with that CEO lens looking at things, he's also trying to see that the United States is not taken advantage of. But, he is asking these questions as to, how China continues to insert itself around the world, whether it's places in Africa or ports in Italy. They understand these strategic points, and, they are really moving forward with.
But the trouble I have with that, sorry to interrupt, the trouble I have with that is that the United States, and Trump in particular, is going back to that pre-20th century philosophy in the US, which is to stay out of everybody else's business, get out of Europe. I mean, George Washington, when he handed over to John Adams, said, stay away from Europe, they're all crazy, or words to that effect, right? And Donald Trump very much seems to be following in that philosophy. We know that the US Army, prior to World War I and II, would raise up and then go back down because they didn't want to have a standing army. World War II and Pearl Harbor obviously changed opinions in Washington on that. But things then got out of control, the Marshall Plan, which paid for Europe to be rebuilt. Because the US policy, particularly Trump's policy, is to get out of things, is it not at all surprising that the Chinese rock up with a bucket of cash?
So I don't necessarily know if it's always getting out of things. It's wanting to not be taken advantage of. So when you look at NATO, for instance, why is the United States paying the full amount when this is safety and security for European countries, and they're not even paying themselves, and it's security for them? Valid point, right? And a lot of Americans did vote for him. So it's something to consider. It's something also for lawmakers, because, we have the three branches of government. It is, of course, the executive office, the Oval Office, who's in there, but also the House of Representatives and also the senators. And so they all really need to have some serious conversations moving forward. Again, when you look at, the Gaza war, Trump said, release the hostages, or there'll be all hell to pay. So he's not turning his back. He's not getting out of that situation. He's saying, we have to right the ship here. We need to have some common sense moving forward. We also heard that Vladimir Putin is open to having a respectful dialogue with President Donald Trump. So we'll have to see what happens with that. So he's looking to try to fix and mend things. I don't think that he wants America to succeed and the other countries to fail. That is the biggest message that people around the world really need to hear and to understand. People can take unflattering photos and, of course, only play out embarrassing gaffes and, sound bites. But when you look at it, he addressed the World Economic Forum, and he's just saying, let's all together, rise up and try to make a better world. So hopefully he can do it. I don't really think a lot of people would be against peace and prosperity globally.
Well, I guess the question is if the US leaves the playing field, who comes on, and will, if the US doesn't play peacemaker or global policeman, which is a role that for decades it hasn't just had to do, but it's wanted to do, what happens when they leave, and what are the ramifications of that? You were talking about Republicans. Now, they came together, obviously, and Trump has been speaking to them in Florida about, I guess, his agenda, and also the fact that they currently hold a Washington trifecta, the executive branch, the House of Reps, and also the Senate. Let's have a listen now to President Trump.
This has been a very exciting, and will be a very exciting, new chapter. There's nothing we cannot achieve as long as the Republican Party remains united. And in January 2027, we will have a larger Republican House, a larger Republican Senate, and our country will be richer, safer, stronger, prouder, greater, freer, and ever before.
Now, a united Republican Party is really a MAGA party, because if you think about the Bush type of Republicans, the George W. Bush, the George H. Bush, Jeb Bush, of course, who had been governor there for quite some time too, it was a really different party compared to the one that Donald Trump is leading. If and in many ways, the hawks of the Republican Party, who are the ones behind the Afghanistan and the Iraq war, well, Trump has hit out at those people very firmly, including George W. Bush himself. So what is a modern day Republican, and what happens if you're a Bush type Republican?
So it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. So far, we are seeing a lot of support for President Trump and also his agenda. Of course, people definitely know what it is. He has not been shy in these past couple of years, continuing to hold his rallies and to, really just keep touting his list of items that he is interested to do. For these congressmen and women who are in Washington, and also representatives, a lot of them, want to see some of the restrictions for business loosened up. He's looking at taxes. They're also looking at energy. How can we find that? The grid for the United States is quickly becoming very full. And so that is a very real situation, that there is a race to try to figure out energy. So there are a lot of things that are broken and need to be fixed. Just looking at infrastructure, our roadways across the country, even when you look at airlines. So there are a lot of things that need some help. We also saw that the president opened up the valves in California during the wildfires. So that was something else that, a lot of people are trying to exactly understand. So it will be interesting to see how the Republicans, who maybe come from older parties, or they are called sometimes rhinos, what do they think? But if they're listening to their constituents, and the constituents are voting for this change, they want to see some of these values restored, and they just want to see prices come down, they will have to answer to their own constituents, the American people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that people aren't happy with the status quo, and they're not necessarily all agreeing that it's one thing. It just seems to be that we've had a lot of governments that manage, and post-COVID there was an element of, we don't want to know about the government, right? We've seen it even here in Australia with Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, when he took over from Scott Morrison, who had been the Prime Minister of the Conservative side. There was this sense of, we're so tired of government being in our way. And then things kind of slid, nothing really happened. But then when the policies came that they cared about, it wasn't really things that was going to fix things, anything that's tangible. It seems to be at the moment people want to see tangible change, and this has been quite like the 1970s if you think about it, but where things just keep happening, and the Carter administration, but now we're into a bit like the Reagan administration, where we now know what needs to be done and we want people who can fix it.
Absolutely. And if you look, the CIA Director Dan Radcliffe, he just released a report that was from the CIA under the Joe Biden administration that said that they, would lean towards the COVID happening from a lab leak in Wuhan. Now, of course, they didn't release it. So he comes in this week and he releases it. It's not a new report. It's one that was from the Biden-Harris administration. So a lot of people here in the United States, they may have lost loved ones It was a horrible during the COVID lockdowns, and they don't understand why you are withholding information. They're adults, they can handle it. I think you see that with the JFK files and the MLK files, hopefully eventually being released in the next couple of weeks. So, there's a lot of mistrust. You see mismanagement of a lot of situations, mismanagement of money, resources when you look at the water in California. Now also, information. And so I think just people are kind of fed up.